right, and welcome to the Courtenay Turner podcast. I'm your host, Courtenay, and I'm super passionate about moving and thinking. On this show, we are going to dive into all things health, fitness, personal development, lifestyle, and political sociocultural. I've always been fascinated by people, and I love learning from the experiences and stories of others. This has been a treat for me, and I hope this is enjoyable and useful for you. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or any way that I can make this a better experience for you, please don't hesitate to reach out. Hello, welcome to the Courtenay Turner podcast. I am here today with Gary Humble, who is the founder and executive director for Tennessee Stand. How are you doing today, Gary?
I'm doing great. I think we're talking about freedom or something like that, right?
Yeah, I hope so. So for my audience members who may not know, tell me a little bit about you and how and why you started Tennessee Stand.
Yeah, so I run an organization here in Tennessee that advocates for a limited government and a constitutional form of government. Married, have 3 little boys here in Tennessee, and this organization really thrust forward during the response to COVID in the middle of 2020, and in particular at the time, my boys were in public schools, and that's when we were seeing what they were calling the reopening frameworks in terms of what the situation in the public school was going to be and how they were going to address COVID. And that was the first time that we saw in writing that the flattening the curve was going to go well into the following year. It was going to follow the entire school year. It was in that moment that it sort of it shocked my system to say, wait a minute. We were still hoping in last June that this was going to be over in a couple of months, but now there's a plan that this is going to go on well into the next year. So we became very active in schools, and then in policymaking in our legislature, filed a few lawsuits, but all centered around, in schools, parental rights, the right to make health decisions for your own children, right? Pretty basic stuff.
Right. Shouldn't be a novel concept, should it?
No. but even here in freedom-loving Tennessee, those liberties are being challenged. So
yeah. Wow. So what would you say has been some of the biggest challenges you've come up against since you started this?
Well, I would, in general, I think there's a pretty huge sentiment, and sort of rightly so. I mean, Tennessee is, relatively speaking, probably still one of the most conservative states in the country. Is when you put us up, even against other states in the South, which tend to be a little bit more conservative than maybe say the West Coast. But even that, when you go into the General Assembly and you bring some of these policies, in a General Assembly, a legislature, by the way, that is a super majority, a Republican legislature, right, which again, you assume to be mostly conservative. And you walk in there with a bill, for example, like we ran last year, pretty simple, to secure religious exemptions to vaccines. Well, you're thinking super majority GOP legislature, you're in the Bible Belt, like this is a piece of cake. Come on. This is an automatic win. This is a gimme, and you walk in there and there's five committees, basically 5 steps to go through to get a bill passed. And we were in step 1 in House Health Subcommittee. There's 11 people on the committee. We only got 3 votes on the bill. The bill was like dead, like right upon entry, just dead. And that was a shock to the system to realize, wow, there are significant powers at play here, and in my opinion, from the healthcare industry. Some of your viewers, listeners may not know that there is no more money that flows through the healthcare system in the United States than in Tennessee. We are numero uno in the United States. We are in the belly of the beast here in Tennessee.
Naturopaths are banned in Tennessee. There are only 2 states in the entire country where naturopathic licenses are illegal, and it's Tennessee and West Virginia.
Okay. And yeah, I knew Tennessee was one of them. So
Yeah.
anyway, welcome to the land of freedom here in Tennessee. But so that challenge was rather eye-opening to what we were facing, even in our supermajority Republican legislature.
Right. So, and you have an upcoming session, right?
Finally, the after much trial and tribulation, our legislature has called or will be calling. We're actually still waiting on the announcement. It's supposed to happen today or tomorrow, we're being told, but they are calling for a special session of the General Assembly to begin October 27th, which is slated to address these mandates by employers for the shot, masks in our schools, and a few other things that we're looking to be addressed. So we remain hopeful. It looks like that's going to happen.
Awesome. Could you talk a little bit about that process? I don't think a lot of people are that familiar with how this all actually works. Unfortunately, yeah.
Just the legislature in general.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, constitutionally, probably in every state, it tends to be the case, but certainly in Tennessee, our legislature holds the most authority. They are our lawmaking body. They are our representatives. That's our state house and our state senate. And they are the men and women that make the laws that you and I must abide by. But it's not just making law.
Right.
They have a constitutional duty to first and foremost secure individual liberty. The liberties that our Constitution secures to you and I, it is the job of the General Assembly to create law, make law to ensure that those rights are secured in every instance. And they're not doing that, by the way. That is failing right now. And so the process in Tennessee to bring a bill to pass, there would be a bill submit. We have companion bills in the state. So the same bill has to be passed in the House and in the Senate. Mm-hmm. And once those bills are passed in both of those chambers, it then goes to the governor for his signature. Our legislative sessions here in Tennessee, we have a part-time legislature. So a lot of people don't know this. They're like, well, we pay you to do your job. And that's sort of true. But Tennessee legislators are part-time legislators here in our state. They are men and women that still have businesses and full-time jobs. They only get paid $24,000 a year by the state. So it's sort of a stipend to do the jobs that they do. So it's not a life sustaining income. And they are only in session from about mid-January to roughly the end of April, beginning of May. It fluctuates. And in May, when the gavel drops, they're out of session and they're back in their districts living life. I mean, still having conversations about legislative activity, but insurance agents, I mean, I know one of our legislators is a locksmith, farmers, just everyday men and women. So what we're calling for right now, our legislature is out of session. And while Tennesseans are struggling under all of these mandates, job loss, craziness going on in schools. Yeah. So we're asking the General Assembly to call themselves into a special session to address these issues. And our Constitution allows the General Assembly, with a 2/3 majority vote, they can have the authority to call themselves back into session and make law, make policy, and address the issues that's what's happening right now. 2/3 of the House and 2/3 of the Senate has agreed, yes, we are coming back into session and we are going to address these COVID issues.
Awesome. And so specifically like the mandates, is that what you're targeting right now?
Yeah. And well, so the House actually put out a letter of what they expect to address. And one specifically was the COVID mandates for employees. They are also, shockingly, I'm pleasantly surprised. It looks like they are going to address the governor's emergency powers in our state. By the way, in Tennessee, we are still 18, 19 months in that we are still under a declared state of emergency in our state.
Wow.
And our governor is still issuing executive orders under that state of emergency. Quite incredible.
Yeah.
So looks like the legislature is finally going to address that. They're also addressing masks in schools, and they're going to be addressing school board elections. We have been asking, we don't want people hiding who they are anymore. Right now, those elections are nonpartisan, meaning you don't have to declare whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. I just love the kids. Elect me to your school board. I just love the children. No, we want to make those partisan elections. We actually want to see a little bit about who you are. We want to see, is there an R or a D by your name? What is your ideology that you're going to govern with? So that actually looks like it's going to be addressed in this special session.
And there was a replacement for school board that's being proposed currently, right?
Well, that was actually done last week.
Okay, it was done last week.
Yeah, so we had a vacancy in District 4 here in Williamson County. And so constitutionally or by state law, whenever there's a vacancy, that becomes your county commission's job to vote to appoint someone to that vacancy until the next general election. So we appointed one of the vice presidents of Pfizer to our school board. Brilliant.
No conflict of interest at all.
None. Zero. Nope. Not at all.
So what is the sentiment around that? Is that something that people are concerned about?
It's not good. No. We brought a petition with over 1,300 verified Williamson County voter signatures asking the county commission to slow down, delay the vote, don't do this, give the parents a voice, let's vet some more candidates, which 1,300 signatures in a county commission is a big petition. That's a significant voice. There was also 30 minutes of public comment in the commission meeting from people asking them to delay the vote. They did not. They appointed Mr. Josh Brown and did it anyway. So it's another example that you're seeing across the country.
Yeah.
Parents and citizens are showing up. They're putting their name out. Yeah. They're letting their voice be heard. And the bodies that make these decisions just ignore it and do whatever it is they were going to intend to do anyway. That is one of the things that Tennessee Stands is against, and that we hope to continue to get citizens to be louder and louder and louder until we have an elected body representing us that is willing to actually represent the people that are speaking, and not just their own self-interests and their own political leanings.
Right. Yeah. No, I'm so grateful that you're doing that. What are some ways that concerned citizens can get involved? What do you recommend for them?
So always it starts local. You should be.
All politics are local. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So, do you know if you're in if any county you're in the country, do you know what district you live in? Do you know who your county commissioners are? Do you know who your city council is? Do you know who's on your school board? Here in Tennessee, do you know who your county mayor is? These things are important. So we're encouraging people to know who your elected representatives are, have their email address in your contacts, email them whenever be vocal with them. Too often people are like, well, they don't want to, they're too busy. Who am I? Well, they ran for office. They ran for office to hear from you. We need to stop whining about the policies that are taking place around us when we've never even contacted our representative to voice our opinion. That has to change. We live in a system of self-governance. This is our responsibility. We're supposed to be doing the work, but for so long we've shirked that responsibility to someone else. And here we are in 2021 with progressives that have taken over every sector of our society, and some conservatives want to whine about that. Well, where have you been over the last You know, it's great. We raise families, we work, we go on vacation. Those are all good and noble things.
Sure.
But we can't do those things and forsake the work of governing ourselves.
Yeah. And we won't be able to do those things if these policies continue to go in the direction they're going.
That's a fantastic point.
Yeah. So if we want to continue to do those things, we do need to step up and take some responsibility. You were saying that we're seeing these, the very similar policies, and we're seeing similar kind of actions where they're ignoring the sentiment of the people across the country. Why do you think that is?
I'm sure there's plenty of answers to that question. I think in general, I think there has been a clear agenda for many, many years. By the way, and this, I know this is, well, I say this is very political. Well, you're talking to like a political guy here. So, in my world, mm-hmm. everything revolves around politics. All decisions are political, right?
I think, unfortunately, in the past 18, now almost 19 months, everything is political, whether you want it or not, unfortunately.
Yeah. So there's been a clear agenda for a very long time in this country to move us away from founding principles. It's interesting. People that are getting active in politics now, they want to look at what's going on in the media, and it's like a shock. It's like, oh my God, what's happening? Nothing that's happening right now is new. Back in a 1912 inaugural address by President Woodrow Wilson, who was one of the fathers of what we consider modern progressivism. Yeah. So over 100 years ago, we had a president talking about some of the same things that Biden has said, where, constitutional amendments. I mean, it's not really, set in stone.
The federal government can override states' rights.
Yeah, no big deal. We do that all the time.
Amendment? No. Yeah.
I mean, Woodrow Wilson was already talking about a living constitution, that the words of the Constitution didn't really mean what the founders meant. It sort of evolves with the time. So, fast forward into the 1940s and FDR and the New Deal, where we basically created now what the fourth branch of government, a nanny state. So again, I think the reason you're seeing that is because you've had an agenda that has been successful in taking over government institutions, educational institutions, media, almost all institutions. And you've got generations now that have been indoctrinated from birth as to these very specific ideologies. And we're now living with the repercussions of that. And what's the fix? I don't know. It's not just pass this bill, pass this law, and we're good to go. We're now in the fight for the next 20 years on how do we now reframe the next generation's thinking into these foundational founding ideas that have gotten us this far. We have to bring those back so that hopefully we have another 250 years of American ideals, freedom ideals of individual liberty, and the fact that our rights come from God, and the fact that governments don't dictate our rights. These are important principles that we've lost.
Very much so. Very much so. Also, when you were saying that people don't realize how much of big pharma is involved, and that they're running a lot of the policies that we have currently, especially in Tennessee. I don't know how to. I think a lot of times, I'm trying to think of how to phrase this question. A lot of times when you bring up some of these things, people just, even conservatives, they dismiss it. and they, it's either a conspiracy theory or, they think that, that it's really all for their well-being, which is always how tyranny comes. It's for your protection and for your well-being. But so they're not as open to really, and I think people need to understand, they say follow the money. I think it's really important for people to see these connections, to understand what is driving this, because it's such a big machine. And in order to really be able to get the people involved the way we need to, I think people need to be able to see this. So what are some of your thoughts on that?
Well, you said the right phrase, follow the money.
Right.
Look, you can go online right now here in Tennessee, and you can pull the campaign finance reports of every legislator, every elected official here in Tennessee. And so I'll give you an example. When we went to pass this bill to secure religious exemptions to vaccines in the state of Tennessee, and it shockingly died. Well, I did something that maybe not many people do. I'm kind of a data geek. I went online and pulled all of the campaign finance records for all of these legislators that were on the committee. Well, guess what? In total, sitting on the committee of 11, there, if you total up all the money from pharma, medical, doctors, just the medical field in general, right at about $1 million invested into the campaigns of that one committee. Now, do you think the medical community, to some degree, expects a return on investment on those dollars? Well, of course. You look at the chairman of that committee, and you look at his campaign contributions over the last few years. Guess how much of his campaign contributions comes from, and he's a doctor, by the way, so it makes sense, but 69% of his funding comes from the Tennessee Hospital Association, the Tennessee Medical Association, Pfizer, Eli Lilly, on and on and on and on, and doctors and anesthesiologists, medical professionals. And you have to ask yourself the question, well, whenever their future well-being in their political career depends upon, money coming from the medical community, might that same medical community expect to get their way, especially when a law is presented that might directly impact their revenue stream? Well, of course, it's always follow the money, always.
Right. Yeah, so hopefully more people will do that. It's all there for them to see. They can go and look at the campaign financing and start seeing for themselves where the money is driving some of these things.
It'll keep you up late at night.
I'm sure. So I've also heard, and I'm not that clear on it, it was just something in passing, but that they're bringing some new green energy for vehicles. And it was going to employ 3,800 people. So a lot of people are very excited about that, but.
Yeah, I don't know about the green part necessarily. I mean, I guess they're calling it green, maybe. I mean, there's been two major developments. One was a few months ago. We have which was a great deal. Not a lot of corporate welfare involved, thankfully. And right here in Murray County in Middle Tennessee, I think LG is the parent company. We have a company coming in that's over a $2 billion investment in the state. And they're doing batteries, batteries for electric cars. But I think maybe the thing you might be referencing right now is this mega site. So we just approved a mega site in West Tennessee, just north of Memphis, for a new plant from Ford. It is, and I think a lot of it is the future of Ford's electric vehicle production worldwide, actually. So it's almost a $6 billion development. It is the largest single investment from a corporation into the state of Tennessee in the history of Tennessee. It is also the largest single investment from Ford in its history in any production facility. It's supposed to create 6,000 jobs on site and over 21,000 indirect jobs. Now, the part I don't like about that sounds great, right?
Right.
It's like, oh, investment in the state. Oh, jobs. Yes.
Right.
Awesome. Here are the Here are the two problems. So the problem is that in order to get this deal, it actually, they said $500 million, but if you add up all the infrastructure required through tax incentives and infrastructure money spent, the state of Tennessee is spending over $800 million of your tax money. 500 million of that directly to the Ford Corporation, and the other 300 and some odd million in incentives and infrastructure improvements needed in West Tennessee to make the development happen. Now, I call that corporate welfare. The legislature calls that incentives, state incentives, right. Because why? Well, growth. Well, what if we spent, can you imagine if we spent $800 million incentivizing small business throughout this, especially after COVID, after shutting everything down? What would that do to small cities and rural towns across the state if we did that instead of pumping it all into Ford? The second issue is we are continually seeing the influence of blue corporations in our state, these very progressive policies that are pushed by large corporations. Well, Ford is one of the biggest. They push all of these policies all over the world. And we're now incentivizing them to make the largest investment they've ever made in the state of Tennessee. Do you think maybe that their policies might follow that investment? The answer is yes.
So I know. Someone was telling me about it. They were so excited because, jobs and all this money, and that was kind of your point, is kind of where my head went. I was like, this doesn't sound ideal. I would much rather see it be going to small businesses and rebuilding the communities, not the big corporations.
Like, you came from California, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Californians saw this happen over. This is exactly the recipe to see a conservative, freedom-loving state turn into the type of government that issues more and more measures of control over its people and subsidizes, centralizes business into large corporations and pushes policies top down. This is exactly how this works.
Exactly how this works. And it is antithetical to our founding. We are a grassroots founding. It's self-governing, right? So in order to have it be self-governing, it's from the bottom up. It's we the people.
That's right.
Not top down. So yeah, we definitely, I would like to see less of that for sure.
Yeah, of course, me too.
Yeah. So you were saying that you're also currently in the middle of a couple of lawsuits. Can you talk about that? Yeah.
I mean, and they're all, look, be honest, we're not having any big wins here. Courts suck. They are just as, some of these judges, by the way, are elected officials. So think about that. Think about if you're a judge and you're coming up on an election, how that may influence the way that you interpret law or rule, or not, or just choose to let it sit. So we've had a lawsuit against the governor over the emergency powers for sitting in court for over a year. We're currently heading into appeal. We've sued school boards over the mask mandates. Lately, we have two current lawsuits. One, we've sued Ascension Healthcare on behalf of a group of nurses over the vaccine requirements in the hospital. We have also sued Middle Tennessee State University in Murfreesboro, representing a nursing student who is under a vaccine requirement as a nursing student here in our state. So there's all sorts of these various freedom-taking things that we're trying, that so far have not been protected by the legislature. So we're trying to have the conversation in the courts. But even there, you see courts that just choose somehow not to address the issue by delaying and delaying and delaying. Or there's this lovely little thing we have in the court called standing, where a judge gets to determine, oh, you don't have standing. It's remember in the election, whenever Texas tried to sue over the election, and the Supreme Court says, oh, well, you don't have standing.
Yep.
So this is what courts do when they don't want to decide something. They just say, you don't have standing. You don't belong here. We're not going to hear your case. So that's where we are on some of this stuff.
Yeah. So a lot of people may say that, lawsuits don't have any, because it's such a battle, and because the courts and the judges are so corrupt, from what we're seeing. That's at least what they appear to be. So a lot of people tend to take the approach that, lawsuits don't really have any weight. What are your thoughts on, should people still be?
Well, they do. Sometimes you win.
Yes.
And I mean, sometimes you win. And I would argue, if you're not funding folks who are pushing the right legislation, and you're not funding folks who are filing lawsuits that are trying to protect, to make the legal argument to protect liberty, then what are you going to fund? Are you going to fund a militia? Because that's like the only thing left. There's only 3 branches of government. After that, we're at Article 1, Section 1, where it says the people have the right to abolish or reform their government. That's like the only step left. So I'm not advocating for that right now. I would still say, I still hold out hope that America works, and that we need to fund the right initiatives. And not only do we need to be supporting legislators who are defending liberty, but we also need to be having these conversations in court when they need to be had.
Right. And even if we don't win, do you think that there's merit in having, filing the suit and showing that there is a, voice behind this?
Yes, because you're having the conversation. Like here's a great example. This is a great example of something that happened in one of our lawsuits that some might call a loss. We actually considered it a win. Okay. We've been saying since the pandemic started that school boards have no legal authority. There is no legal basis in the state of Tennessee whatsoever for a school board to make a mask mandate. It's made up. It doesn't exist. Yeah. It's not anywhere in law. Yeah. Of course, we were just saying that. And we were providing the proof, but people were like, well, who are you? And you're not a judge. And, what do you? Well, so that was one of our lawsuits. Well, we're in appeals right now. The county judge, we lost the case, but only because the judge dismissed us based on standing. However, he did something really interesting in his court opinion, which judges rarely do. He issued what's called an alternate ruling. So in other words, to say, I'm not giving these people standing, I'm dismissing the case, but if they had standing, here's how I would have ruled. Ooh. So it has no legally binding authority from the bench because he dismissed the case.
Right.
Yet he gave his legal opinion and put it on paper. Right. And guess what he said?
What did he say?
He can't find anywhere in the law by which a school board has the authority to issue a requirement for face coverings. So while we didn't win, quote unquote, for the first time, we actually have a court document from a sitting judge in the state of Tennessee who has interpreted our laws. Mm-hmm. And he has the opinion also that, I don't know how y'all are doing this. Sure seems to me y'all are making this up, because I can't find anywhere by our Constitution or by state law that anyone has given you the authority to do this. And so we have used that very effectively to take to school boards and take to other county attorneys that have kept some counties from mandating the masks any further. It's a small win, right? Yeah. But it's something. And so
It is.
you take that and you run with it.
Yeah, and it's also something to build on. It does set some sort of a precedent for future cases and how to approach them.
Yep.
So yeah, that's we'll take it. It's a good start.
Yep.
So we were talking about how across the country we're seeing very similar things, and I think a lot of that has to do with the Great Reset is not a secret at this point. People are quite familiar with it, and a lot of what we're seeing is in lockstep with the Great Reset.
Oh, you're conspiracy theorists.
Right? Yeah. But it's not it may be conspiracy. It's not a theory because the white papers have laid it out.
But we have these labels now to prove you're crazy, right? And dismiss whatever you're saying. I love how we do that.
Which was actually a term that was weaponized by the CIA in 1957 to avoid investigation into the Warren Commission. So that's where that term became weaponized and popularized. And
did not know that. Interesting.
Yeah, and I think it was document 1016. 930. I'm blanking on the exact number, but but there's an actual document. You can go find it, and I'll find it and put the link in. But because I'm blanking on the number, but so we have the terms, and I believe conspiracy does exist, and it can only survive in the dark. So we need to shine light on conspiracies that have evidence behind them. But all of this to say that it is a way to shut down the conversation, but we are seeing so many of these initiatives being put forth, and this agenda has become quite prevalent throughout the country. So I'm curious your thoughts on, we do have states' rights, the 10th Amendment, and we're based on federalism. It's the United States of America. It's not one. It's not a central homeland. We are united individual sovereign states. So what are your thoughts on that? I mean, like in terms of how we can combat the Great Reset and regain, sovereignty as a nation and, empower the country.
States absolutely must. State legislators must begin asserting states' rights the way our founders understood states' rights and state sovereignty, if we have any hope to have any place where freedom still exists. I do think that federalism is the most beautiful thing about the United States, in the sense that the Constitution forms a centralized government for very specific purposes. For example, for the common defense. Our founders, and a lot of people don't really think about this, before our Constitution in 1777, when they wrote the Articles of Confederation, and we operated under that until 1790, I believe, when the Constitution was ratified. 89 or 90, gosh, I can't remember now. But until that Constitution was ratified, there were 13 independent sovereign states that were treated as nations. And that was hard. It was confusing because, for example, you could have South Carolina that could have formed its own treaty with Spain, and New York could have formed its own treaty with France. Next thing you know, Spain and France are at war with each other. So now South Carolina and New York are at war with each other. So that was an issue. Not to mention that each state at the time, they were creating their own currency. So you couldn't even go from South Carolina to North Carolina and engage in commerce. It was a mess. So for those specific reasons, the founders realized, well, these separate sovereign states are great, and we want to keep that, but we need something central that regulates these really basic things like currency and the common defense. So, but that said, in terms of how we live and how we see life, that is the beauty of these separate states. I live in Tennessee. I'm just going to be honest. People, bag on California. And look, can I just say, as long as it doesn't affect me, I don't care what you do in California.
Right.
I just don't. I don't care. If you want to give all of your money to the state government in California and hope that they feed you, do it. That's your
Getting pretty
prerogative.
close to that.
Yeah, well, I know. That's why federalism works, is because states do have some ability to run their own affairs and organize society in such a way that those people agree to and elected their local representation to do. So
Right.
I formed Tennessee Stands to do one thing.
Yeah.
I can't control what they do in the White House. I can't control what they do in California, but we can control what we do here in Tennessee. And we have a singular mission. I pretend that we have built, that there is a wall around the state border, right? That's how I view Tennessee. We're building a wall. And what we're saying is, these are the kinds of policies we're going to live by in Tennessee. This is how we do our budget. This is how we look at freedom. This is how we think about God and conservatism and religion and whatever the case may be. Right. This is how we do things in Tennessee. If you would like to come into Tennessee and do those things with us, that's great. Right. You're welcome to do so. But if you would like to do it the other way, go over there. You know,
right.
Don't do that over there. They love that stuff over there. So that's federalism. That's what it means to me. Yeah. And that's what we're trying to do here in Tennessee.
Awesome. I love it. So when you're speaking about that, and you were talking about creating the border and keeping, if you like your policies over there, then keep them over there. Don't bring them here. But we are seeing a major influx into Tennessee, particularly into some of the cities here.
We're ranked number one.
What?
We're ranked number one. We're in imports right now.
Yeah. And particularly into Nashville, there's, I think it's the fastest growing city, right? In the country.
2020, Nashville was the fastest growing city. I believe Knoxville was number 10. Yep.
Wow. So what are your thoughts on that with, people, this mass influx, and a lot of it is coming from more liberal states and cities, and Nashville is already, and the cities in Tennessee are already more blue than some of the other areas of Tennessee. So
it's twofold. Yeah. Part of it's very scary, and part of it's very hopeful. The scary part is that you have folks coming here that are exporting those ideologies into Tennessee, they come here for low taxes, but forget that the reason we have low taxes is because we do government a certain way, and they're used to voting another way, and they vote that way, and then we lose it all. So that's obviously the fear. You've seen the T-shirts, don't California my Tennessee, and all that sort of stuff. But I would also say there's another side to that coin. I have the fortune of speaking in several places all across the state, and I don't know why. I guess what we do is just attractive to people coming from California. It seems like I don't, but it seems to me that many of the freedom-loving people that are moving from places like California are attending our rallies, and I've met well over 200 or 300 of them personally, shaking their hand and talked to them, and they seem to me, at least the ones I've met, to be literal freedom refugees. Like they love freedom, they love the Constitution, they love America, and their sentiment is, I fought as long as I could in California until I realized there's no hope left. I could not find my ability to any longer to turn the tide. And so we left and we came to Tennessee. So you're one of those.
I'm one of them. Yeah.
And that to me gives me hope, because the way I look at that is, you have people who see things in such a way that even Tennesseans that have lived here all of their lives don't see. It's almost like we're the the proverbial frog in the boiling water. We've lived in freedom land for so long that we can't see the little bits of freedom being taken away here and there that will eventually lead to its demise.
Yeah.
And Californians who have been there come here with eyes wide open, and they see some of these things and they're shaking us. Like, don't you see what you're doing? Wake up.
Yes.
We need that. We need that voice here in Tennessee. We need that shaking to understand that protecting freedom now is important if we have hope to have freedom in the future for our children, our posterity. So there's two sides to that coin.
Right.
My hope is, you can only hope that we have more true freedom refugees than those that desire what they've left behind. Right.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that, because I actually recently had a conversation with someone, and I was pushing back a bit, and it was mostly about the Ford situation, and just very, very excited about it. And my whole I really said what you said, was just that I see how, because I'm coming from where so many freedoms were completely stripped, and we were really just like hanging on for dear life, and that's how it felt. I felt like I was going into battle every day, and so I love what everything that's going on here, and I love seeing the resistance and the preservation of freedom and the respect for freedom. And so that's why I'm here. I also feel that I have a friend who says, like, one of his missions is to make the red states redder, and that's a way to really preserve the freedom and the liberties and the Constitution, restore America. I think that's absolutely right. So I thought trying to make it really clear, like, the only reason I push at all is because I don't want what happened there to happen here.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I think too, like, there's a group of people that I feel like I can't talk to. Like, your thinking is so far gone that there's just not even a conversation to be had. An example of that, there was a reporter that had sent me an email some weeks ago from the BBC, and he said, I'm in the U.S., I'm researching all these mandates, and you're really doing a significant work here in Tennessee, and I'd like to talk to you. Well, I was like, yeah, whatever. BBC. I mean, this is not going to go well. It's like CNN. I'm like, I'm just not interested. So I ignored him. Well, I was speaking at a health freedom expo in Murray County like 3 weeks ago, and that event was on our event calendar on our website. Well, he tracked me down and showed up at that event and cornered me after I finished speaking. And he literally had his whole camera rig there. Hey, I'm such and such from the BBC. I sent you an email. I said, yes, I remember that. He said, well, can you do an interview right now? I was like, fine. What? So here we go. And his first question was, or his statement was, I don't understand why you guys are so caught up on freedom. Why is everything about freedom? Why do you want freedom so much? And I'm just like this. Doesn't everybody want freedom?
Right.
Like, what has happened to you? What have you been told? Where have you lived that freedom is not even worth it anymore to you? That it's something that's not really necessary for your life. And one of his, and I was just got to say this, one of his examples, he said, what, I live in Vermont. I was like, oh, you live over there with Bernie. Well, yeah, so boy, that's the land of the free up there, isn't it? He says, well, he says, it really is. I think we're more free in Vermont than we are in Tennessee. He said, did you realize in Vermont, legally, you can walk down the street naked? He said, that's freedom. He said, y'all don't even have that in Tennessee. And I'm thinking to myself, so your idea of freedom is that you can walk down the street naked. This is literally the conversation I'm having with this guy from the BBC about freedom.
And I want to hear the rest of this very quickly. I just want to say something about that, because that's where I think, the conversation about morality is really important. And, in order to have it's one of the things that, why our Constitution was founded on the Judeo-Christian principle, because in order to have the freedoms and free market does not work without, an underlying code of morality to present a checks and balances for it. So I think that that's really what it speaks to, is that there is just such the culture, and you can go to, this goes way back, like the Germans and the Frankfurt School actually had a term, Affenhaven, to negate the culture, destroy the culture, is so instrumental in this. And I think that, freedom is really important, but the counterbalance to freedom is morality. So
that's a great point. I actually, I'd love to say something on that. This idea of freedom and liberty that we have, was it John Adams who said that the Constitution does not work for an irreligious and immoral people? There must be a basis of morality for a healthy functioning society. That has been true since the beginning of humanity and the institution of governments. And I was told by someone that I learned quite a bit from. He wrote a book, and one of his chapters in his book is that the idea that the law teaches. We have to understand that the law, what we say is legal and what we say is illegal in culture, teaches morality. When you think about it, when you grow up as a young woman, a young man, and you learn things that the law says are illegal, well, you're learning those things are bad. When the law says these things are permissible, you're learning these things are good. You bring up Judeo-Christian values. The Apostle Paul taught, he said, I would not have known sin if it had not been for the law. Paul acknowledges he wouldn't even know if he was sent, because he was talking about, Jesus came to abolish the law and fulfill the law. And he's like, well, no, Jesus didn't come to abolish the law. The law is not all bad. I would not have even known that I was a sinner. I wouldn't have even known that I needed Christ if it had not been for the law. The point is, we need law. Law is good for society, and we can't forsake the fact that law is not just about a free-for-all and walking naked down the street. Laws teach us the positive ways and the good ways as to how we not only honor God, but we honor ourselves, we honor each other, so that we might preserve liberty for each other and pass on a free society to our children. That is good governance. Good governance cannot exist without that foundational basis. That is one of the biggest things we're losing right now in our American culture. And it's what scares me the most, is that we are devaluing right and wrong. We are devaluing morality. We are devaluing Christians, by the way, in America. And we're on a very dangerous path.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. So well said. So I'm sorry though, I didn't let you finish your story about the BBC.
Oh, that was it. As soon as he said, oh, naked down the street, that's freedom, I checked out. I was like, this guy's got nothing. I don't know what to say anymore at this point.
Yeah.
I've got no argument for that. I don't know what to say.
Yeah, fair enough. I think that's a good conversation ender as well. But no, so well said. I do think, what do you think are some of the ways that we can restore morality? And yeah.
We have to stop pretending that the Supreme Court in this country defines what morality is. I'll say two things on that are highly controversial to many, but is the foundation of why I feel we have lost a sense of morality and a true north here in this country because of two key decisions we've allowed the courts to make. One was 1973 Roe v. Wade, when we determined for the first time in American history that a mother had the right to kill a child, to abandon a child in the womb. And that, for common law, in common law, back in all law since that time, we always understood. William Blackstone, when he was defining common law in England, which is what the Constitution was based on, we were practicing common law here in America before we wrote a Constitution. And William Blackstone in the 1700s was the key commentator as to what common law meant. And they defined life in the common law, and they recognized life in the common law as soon as, quote unquote, there was a stirring in the mother's womb. The Latin term was in ventre semere. There was a stirring in the mother's womb. That's when they recognized that life existed. And in that moment, that life in the womb was protected, had claims to property, inheritance rights applied to that child. And it was incredible. But think about even today in 2021, think about the total mental breakdown in how we look at life. So the mom can choose to kill the child. But if a stranger kills the woman and she's pregnant, it's a double homicide. I mean, think about that for a moment. So we admit in our laws, we admit that it's a life. We admit that it deserves protecting. We've just arbitrarily carved out a scenario called abortion where, that doesn't count though. We don't need to protect that life in that instance. So that's a problem.
Yeah.
The other issue in terms of morality is marriage. I know people have, even in the church at this point, I'll just acknowledge there are varying opinions and degrees on how we approach same-sex marriage. I'll simply say this: regardless of how you feel about the subject of homosexuality and how it engages with the church and law, the key problem is that we bought into the lie that the Supreme Court has a right to redefine what marriage is. And I will simply tell you, I don't care where you stand on the issue, the rudimentary principle is that our government that we created with a constitution only has enumerated rights to address certain things. It has zero rights to address marriage. It's why, by the way, the United States doesn't have a family court. If you get divorced, if you want custody, if you want alimony, guess where you have to run? Not the federal court. You have to run to your state court. Why? The 10th Amendment. Because the Constitution did not give those rights to the federal government. They were reserved to the states or to the people, which is why family law, marriage, divorce, all of that has always existed in states.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, because of this political agenda, and this conversation in 2015, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, the Supreme Court, the federal government, has a right to redefine marriage. And we all pretend that it's the law. Guess what? It's not only is it not the law, it's a court ruling, which they had no right. The court had no standing to make.
Right.
but this is think with me for a minute how foundational this is to states' rights.
Yeah.
Here's another thing people don't think about same-sex marriage and the court taking upon its own self the authority to redefine it. 30 states, 30 have constitutional amendments that define marriage between a man and a woman. What so many Californians probably are unwilling to acknowledge is that amendment came into California in 2008. I mean, So Californians themselves in 2008
Yep, I remember
defined
that.
marriage as between a man and a woman.
They did.
And not even 10 years later, the Supreme Court decided, oh, we don't care what states say anymore. You have to listen what us 9 people in black robes say. By the way, which none of you elected.
Right.
So I think those two things from a moral perspective, and what we have falsely given the federal government, these areas of jurisdiction that they do not have, I think created a culture whereby we've centralized much of government, and we've given up on states' rights. We've given up on our constitutions. And I think people say, there's a lot of people that are saying, until we go back and correct the 2020 election and we correct the fraud, we don't have a country, and I get that. I understand that sentiment. I would say, until you go back and address these egregious court rulings, as long as those things continue to stand and you continue to pretend that courts make law and override state constitutions, what type of federalist nation do we actually have? We actually don't have it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's so well said. Thank you. What can people do to ensure that type of thing does not happen again? Because I think there are several, on the table now that they're really trying for, and they would like to federalize. So how can we ensure that, those rulings of those powers that be do not become the future of our culture and our...
Two things. The people, we have, one of the big things we say at every one of our rallies is, do not comply. People in general, when it comes to arbitrary power and unconstitutional actions by our government, we must collectively stop complying. I did not agree to obey a government ever that exceeds its authority. Yeah. I will obey a constitutional government all day long. I agree to it. I appreciate it. It's a worthy effort. It is necessary for the good of our society and my children and our future. And I will abide by those rules. Yeah. But when a government chooses to operate in such a way that goes beyond what we've agreed to, it loses its authority in my book. And I know I don't comply with those rules. I refuse to submit to those rules which you have no authority to make. So people in general need to get that and live our lives that way. And secondly, state legislators need to grow a pair and stop pretending that the federal government dictates what laws they cannot and can't make per their state constitutions. And they need to pass laws that protect the liberty of their people and enforce those laws. And if the federal government threatens the state by pulling federal funding, let them pull the federal funding. Look, in Tennessee, our governor right now, Governor Bill Lee, he loves federal funding, loves it, craves it, gets giddy about it. Yeah, I would argue, in a state that is so fiscally sound, that has a $3 billion surplus in our budget, why do we need federal funding? Right. Why must I obey daddy government? So that federal funding for what? We're funding ourselves. Yeah. It needs to stop.
Yeah. My grandfather said, God bless the child that has his own. And Tennessee has his own. Yeah.
That's right.
So, yeah. No, that is awesome. That's a really, really good sound advice. What do you see as the future for both Tennessee and for the country? Do you think that it's hopeful, it's promising? Do you think that we're...
I think we win. I think we win.
Yeah.
I think we win. I think I think freedom is timeless enough, foundational enough, and strong enough that it survives. I think enough people will choose it.
Yeah.
I think right now, many of us are teaching our children to choose it and honor it and revere it.
Yeah.
And I think at the end of the day, though we stand up literally against the gates of hell, that we win. I really do. I can't allow myself to believe otherwise.
Right.
So we'll win.
We'll win. I like it. I like it. And it's certainly worth fighting for regardless. So
It is.
yeah, absolutely. Well, this has been wonderful. Do you have anything else that you would like to close out with, that you want to leave the listeners with?
Do not comply.
Yeah. Yeah. And even on the
comply.
very little things, I think that that's, they're masters of incrementalism. And I think that that's part of the problem is people think it's like a minor inconvenience. I mean, the hardest part of the 2 weeks to flatten the curve is the first 18 months, people don't realize, right? So that the goalpost has always moved. So, I know I've gotten, certainly in California, I mean, where I was, I got a lot of pushback for, fighting for not complying. I literally, actually, I wrote an article about this. I went to a doctor's appointment and I'm blind in one eye. So I was developing these chalazions. So they were like very painful, very big styes in the center of my lid on the eye I see out of. And a lot of it being caused by the mask. And I went to the doctor to see, to consult about this because I'm blind in the other eye. So it was very concerning to me. Long story short, or not so short, but they were forcing me to wear the mask and it was burning so much in my eye that I really couldn't. I was like, that's the reason I'm here. So I said, there was nobody in the entire waiting room. They said, we're going to have to call security. They called security. They circled me and they literally chanted. I mean, it was like a chant and they go, comply. Comply.
Oh, come on.
Comply. Yep. I'm not kidding. I'm not making I wish I had filmed it. I mean, I was in such a state of shock and panic that I didn't even think to get the phone out. But they just kept saying that until they finally said to me, excuse me, ma'am, you're going to have to comply. If you don't, we will escort you out and we can arrest you. I don't think they actually could. I looked into it since, and I think they were just like security. I don't think they actually, but they were that like in between because it was a school medical facility. But, they were trying to scare me clearly into complying. And I've had so many people on instances like that, on so many things say, it's what's the big deal? It's just the mask. It's just a this, it's just the that. But it's never just. So I think we really need to, put a stop and say, no, I'm not going to comply. And it may be inconvenient in the meantime, but otherwise it's going to get really inconvenient.
Yeah, it's just a mask. It's just a shot. Well, what's this? Just a what? What next? It's just a pill. Yeah, I fully agree. Thank you for standing up like that. We all need to do it.
Yeah.
I think courage is contagious too.
I think so too. And I'd like to see a lot more of it. And I'm so grateful to be here where I feel like there is a lot more of it. So yeah. So thank you for everything you're doing. Tell people where they can find you.
Yeah. So you can visit TennesseeStands.org, TennesseeStands.org. And of course we're on Facebook, though they are squashing us pretty hard these days, but Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Gab, MeWe, and Telegram as well. And please subscribe to our YouTube channel until they turn it off. But we would appreciate you signing up to our email list at TennesseeStands.org. That is a big deal. Sign up to our email list. We send out weekly emails letting you know about things that are happening in Tennessee that others will not tell you. So it's a good email list to be subscribed to, and appreciate your support. And thanks for the opportunity to be on your show.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I'm so sorry I lied. I have one more question for you.
Okay.
And it's about, you were saying that they're, squashing you. The censorship has been egregious, and, everybody, I think, is feeling it, even on, all sides. What are some of your suggestions on how people surmount that? Because I think part of the strategy is to atomize people. And right now, I think people need to to get together and be able to, congregate. So,
on a social media sense, I mean, we've got to we've got to embrace some of these alternate forms of media. I mean, like, Telegram, Gab. I really appreciate Gab, but at some point, understand that even though you go to the current freedom-loving social media, someone still owns that data, and who's to say that at some point in the future they don't get squirrely and turn you off. So I think anytime you depend upon someone else's platform, that's a problem. I think we probably need to go old school a little bit. We need to be meeting again.
yeah.
We need to be showing up in homes, and community gatherings. And look, I have found that the people that I have seen here in Tennessee really form a sense of community are the people that are showing up together in their school board and county commission meetings. The people that are consistently showing up to those meetings have become lifelong friends and a support network to each other that is fanning the flames of freedom and fueling them to continue to fight, because they now know their neighbors who believe like they do. And just like our founders who pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor to each other to see this great thing, America, happen. I think those small bits of community where we connect with each other is critical. It goes way beyond our Facebook page, and we cannot forsake the gathering, the assembling of each other. So
awesome. Well said. I completely agree. All right. Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you again. And welcome to Tennessee.
Thank you.